There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from being invisible for too long. From being the person in the family whose boundaries are treated like suggestions, whose space is treated like a shared resource, and whose voice gets acknowledged just long enough for everyone to nod and then do whatever they were going to do anyway. I know that exhaustion well. My name is Nova Drayton, and I have been carrying it most of my life. I am 34 years old. I live on 11 acres of land outside Bozeman, Montana, in a farmhouse I have been rebuilding with my own hands since I was 27. Before that, I grew up in a loud, crowded household in rural Tennessee, with my parents Gerald and Donna Drayton, my older brother Dustin, and the general understanding that in the Drayton family, what belonged to one person belonged to everyone. My dad Jerry ran things with this easy, unquestioned authority that nobody ever seemed to think twice about. He was not a cruel man. He was not even a bad father by most definitions. He just had this way of making decisions that included everyone's lives, except in the actual decision-making part. I left Tennessee at 22, worked hard, lived small for years, took a remote job as a project coordinator for a logistics firm out of Denver, and saved every dollar I could until I had enough to do the one thing I had been dreaming about since I was 15 years old, sharing a bedroom and feeling like I was disappearing. I bought land. I bought my own land. And I built something on it that was entirely, completely, 100% mine. The farmhouse was a wreck when I got it. The kind of property that makes real estate agents choose their words very carefully. But I saw what it could become, and I worked toward that for 6 straight years. Refinished the floors myself. Repainted every room. Had the roof replaced and watched every step of it because I needed to see my investment being protected with my own eyes. My neighbor, Renee Stokely, and her husband Dale helped me build the wraparound porch one summer weekend using a tutorial we watched so many times it became a running joke. I planted wildflowers all along the fence line because I read they were good for anxiety, and between my family and my job, I figured I needed the reinforcement. Renee became one of my closest friends through all of it. She's 2 miles up the road, honest without being cruel, and the kind of person who tells you what you need to hear without making you feel bad for needing to hear it. She is also the first person I called on that Tuesday evening in April, when my dad rang my phone and turned my spring upside down. I was at my stove heating up leftover soup when he called. I almost didn't answer. I should have listened to that instinct. Nova. His voice had that particular brightness to it. The brightness that means a decision has already been made and the call is really just a formality. We figured out the venue for Dustin's wedding. Dustin and Paige Whitmore had gotten engaged at Christmas. Paige is a gentle, soft-spoken woman who avoids conflict the way some people avoid bad weather, instinctively and at some personal cost to herself. I liked her well enough. I was happy for both of them. "That's great," I said, stirring my soup. "Where are they doing it?" "Your place." The spoon stopped. "Your farmhouse," he continued. "It's perfect. Open land, the barn, all those flowers you planted along the fence. Paige has been wanting something rustic and outdoor. We've already been letting guests know, last Saturday in June." I turned the burner down. "Dad, I never said yes to that." The pause that followed was not guilty. It was patient. The patience of someone who believes they are explaining something reasonable to someone being unnecessarily complicated. "Nova, you're family. You don't need to agree. This is what families do for each other. Dustin would do the same for you." He believed that. That's what I keep coming back to even now. He genuinely believed it. We finished the call, and I stood in my kitchen watching the soup simmer and feeling that old familiar feeling expand in my chest. Not quite anger yet. Something older. The feeling of being a Drayton, which had always meant that your things were available for communal use, and your opinion about that availability was a courtesy at best. I called Renee that night. "Tell me I'm not losing my mind," I said. She listened to everything. Then, "You're not losing your mind. What are you going to do?" I tried everything reasonable first. I called my mom Donna, who told me I was being sensitive and pointed out that I wasn't using the farmhouse that weekend anyway, as if the issue was scheduling and not consent. I called Dustin directly. That conversation fell apart in minutes. He said Paige had already pictured it, already told people, and that I was going to devastate her if I took it away now. I tried to explain that I had never given it to begin with, and he talked right over me, which was so perfectly, painfully familiar that I almost laughed. I called my Aunt Lucille Harmon, who is the warmest person in the family and who I have always trusted. She sympathized genuinely. I could hear it in her voice. But in the end, she told me to let it go just this once because it would mean so much to everyone. Just this once. My 11 acres, my 6 years of work, just this once. 3 weeks after my dad's call, on a regular Saturday morning when I had no plans and no warning, I looked out my front window and saw my Uncle Bart's truck coming up the gravel drive. Riding with him was Carol DiPietro, a family friend I had met a handful of times, who climbed out of the truck with a notepad and started moving around my property like she was on a scheduled walkthrough. She pointed at my fence line. "Ceremony here, with the flowers behind them." She turned toward the barn. "Reception over there. We'll need to figure out parking along the flat stretch near the road." I was standing on my porch watching this happen. "Nobody told me you were coming," I said. Uncle Bart waved his hand. "Didn't want to bother you. We knew you'd be fine with it." That evening I called my dad, and I was calm and I was clear. The wedding would not be at my property. He raised his voice. I kept mine level. He said I was selfish. I said I was a homeowner exercising a basic right. He said family didn't work that way. I told him that in my home it did. He hung up. What followed was weeks of the kind of exhaustion I described at the beginning. Not physical, emotional. Dustin stopped speaking to me entirely. My mom sent messages that swung between guilt and denial. Carol DiPietro, somehow, left me a voicemail asking to revisit the conversation. Renee came over one night with wine and sat on the porch with me while I processed all of it out loud. At some point, she asked if I was wavering. "No," I said. "I'm worn out, but I'm not wavering." The last Saturday in June came in warm and bright. The kind of Montana morning that makes you understand exactly why you moved here. I knew by then that the family had supposedly arranged an events hall about 40 minutes outside of town. I had not been invited to the wedding. I had made a kind of peace with that. I made my coffee, took it to the porch, watched the light spread gold across the land, and listened to my horses moving slowly in the barn. Then I heard the gravel. One car turned up the drive, then two. Then 4. Then a steady line that kept coming. Uncle Bart's truck, Carol DiPietro's silver sedan. People I half recognized from family Christmases years ago, dressed in their wedding finest, heels entirely wrong for gravel, small wrapped gifts in hand, confusion already starting to register on their faces as they looked around and realized, wherever they thought they were going, this wasn't quite matching the picture. The events hall had apparently had an emergency that morning. A water issue, my dad told me later. And rather than calling me, rather than asking, the family had quietly rerouted every single guest to my address and decided they would handle Nova when they arrived. My dad got out of his car and walked toward me with his palms raised slightly, the universal gesture of a man who knows he has done something and is hoping his body language will soften it. "Nova, just listen." "No." The word came out of me steady and final. "You're going to call every person here right now and give them the correct location. The hall had a serious water problem this morning and we didn't have time to—" "That is not my problem, Dad." People stood in clusters around the driveway watching. I saw Dustin toward the back, jaw set, staring at the ground. And I saw Paige beside him in her wedding dress, and something pulled tight inside my chest when I looked at her. She had not done this. She was a woman who had been told yes by people with no authority to say it, and now she was standing on a gravel driveway on her wedding morning, paying the price for their certainty. I went to her first. I walked straight to her and took her hands and looked at her directly. "Paige, I am genuinely sorry that this is your morning. You deserve so much better than this. But I cannot let this happen here. Not because of anything you did. Because nobody asked me. And a person's home requires asking. That's not negotiable." Her eyes were full. She nodded, just barely. Dustin said my name behind her in a low, tight voice. I let go of Paige's hands and turned back to my dad. "Make the calls." He made them. People stood in my driveway for close to an hour while the family worked their phones. Someone found a park pavilion available for same-day reservation. Someone else made a run for flowers and a few last-minute decorations. It was not the rustic farmhouse wedding with wildflowers and barnwood and open sky that Paige had pictured, but they got married, and my Aunt Lucille, who was the first family member to reach out to me in the days after, told me quietly that it had actually been lovely in its own way. That Paige had laughed through her tears during the ceremony, and that Dustin had not let go of her hand once. I heard that and I was glad. I mean it. I was genuinely glad. After the last car backed out of my driveway, I went inside and washed my coffee mug and stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking out at the fence line. The wildflowers were doing what wildflowers do, completely unbothered, bright and steady in the late morning sun. Renee texted around noon. Still standing? I looked at my land, my porch, my barn, everything I had built. Yeah, I typed back. Come over for dinner. I'll cook. What I want to leave with you is something simple that took me a long time to actually believe. Love does not cancel out the need for consent. Those two things are not in conflict. Real love asks before it assumes. It knocks before it enters. It understands that caring about someone does not give you access to what belongs to them. The people in my family loved me. I don't doubt that. But love without boundaries is not a gift. It's a demand wearing a familiar face. And you are allowed to recognize the difference even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Your home is yours. Your yes matters. And your no is just as valid coming from someone who loves you as it is coming from a stranger. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.